Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Begin by praising and thanking Allah and sending peace and blessings upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of the prophets that came before him. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And today the plan is that we're going to carry on from where we left off last time. So last time we spoke about, last time was the first session. So we're going to carry on from that. And hopefully this session, I'm planning to hopefully end up right at the point of the birth of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So previously, we spoke about the following kinds of things. So we spoke about Arabia and the world around it. We kind of spoke about where is Arabia and what's around Arabia and how do those things then influence the story and what's going to happen. We spoke about the origins of Mecca. So that's what that picture there. So if you recall the story of the Prophet Ibrahim and all the things that happened with the Prophet Ibrahim, Ismail, and all of that, and the founding of the city of Mecca. And then also the building of the Kaaba, which is the second one down there. So if you remember last time, we spoke about the fact that when the Prophet Ibrahim built the Kaaba, that's what it looked like. Okay, so we spoke about those kinds of things. Then we spoke about the descendants of the Prophet Ibrahim, notable ancestors of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So from the children of Ibrahim, father to son, father to son. And one of the things that we mentioned was that in every generation, there was always one very unique individual. So this was something that was just a character quality of the Prophet Ibrahim's descendants, was that, you know, the Prophet Ibrahim has so many sons. We're obviously focused on the Prophet Ismail. Ismail has so many sons, and there was one son who was always just special. And then he would have children, but there was always one son that was just special. And these are the direct ancestors of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So we spoke about some of them, and we spoke about the contributions they made to Mecca. We also spoke about who was in control of Mecca. So for a while, it was the Prophet Ismail's in-laws, right? Because the Prophet Ismail and his mother Hajar are settled into this barren valley, and they're discovered by a tribe, and the tribe settles there with them. This was called Jurhum. They settle with them in that place. And so what happens is that Prophet Ismail marries one of their women, and so basically the Prophet Ismail's in-laws, that family, the family of Jurhum, they populate that area, and they're the ones that live in the city of Mecca. And then what happens is that another tribe called the Khuza'a, this other tribe, they then basically invade Mecca, expel Jurhum, and now they're in charge of the city of Mecca. So where we left off was at this point. Mecca is now under the control of the Khuza'a. Prophet Ismail is long gone. Those generations are long gone. We're now in the time of the Khuza'a people who are in charge of Mecca. And the Khuza'a people very negatively affected the city of Mecca. So I don't know if anybody remembers what they did to negatively affect the city of Mecca. They introduced idols. They introduced idol worship to Mecca. This was the Khuza'a people who do this. Specifically, a man called Ameer ibn Luhay. Ameer ibn Luhay was the chief of Khuza'a, and he used to go to business trips up to Syria and other places, and he discovered people, obviously, in various parts of the Middle East worshipping idols, and so he brings back one of the idols and he introduces it into Mecca, and then from that point, people start bringing idols into Mecca, and so Khuza'a's time in Mecca is a time when the city of Mecca becomes very polluted, religiously speaking, becomes very, very polluted. And there is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he said, I saw Ameer ibn Luhay in the hellfire, and he describes the punishment that he's receiving in the hellfire, which is quite graphic. So, there it is, the introduction of idolatry. So where we are then is we're at the point now where Khuza'a are in charge of Makkah. We're several generations now past the Prophet Ismail alayhi salam, and this is the ancestors of the Prophet from the point that we left off. Okay, so Prophet Ismail is way above, and then father, son, father, son, father, son, and then you have Fihr, and Fihr is the one who's known as Quraysh, right? And I don't know if anybody remembers, we spoke about last time what Quraysh means. You remember? Huh? No. The word Quraysh, a shark. Yeah, it means a little shark. Yeah, so family of Quraysh, little shark. There's lots of stories about why he was called Quraysh. So Quraysh has a son, Ghalib. Quraysh had many sons, right? But Ghalib was his foremost, like, special son that everybody knew this guy's special. And then he has a son called Lu'ay, special. He has a son called Ka'b, special. Ka'b used to speak to the people and say that a prophet will come from me. Like, Ka'b had an awareness of that in him. And he used to boast about it, that a prophet will come from me. They actually tell stories about how he used to sit people around the fire. He would recite poetry and tell stories about that. His son is Murrah, his son is Kilab, and then his son is Qusay. Qusay is the game changer, because this whole time up to here, this is the family of the Prophet, peace be. These are ancestors of the Prophet, but they're living under the rule of Khuza'ah. So there's somebody else is in charge of Makkah, and all these people, as they go down the generations, their story is our ancestors founded Makkah. This is our city, right? This is our city, but now we've been invaded, and this other group of people are now ruling, but the city is rightfully ours. Qusay is the one who takes control of Makkah back from Khuza'ah. Okay, and the way that he does this, we'll come to how he does that. But Qusay is he's one of the most important, if not the most important, ancestor of the Prophet after the Prophet Ismail, because he sets the rest of the situation of Makkah is the way that Qusay left it, basically. Okay, I also want to emphasize another person. So Qusay has a son called Abd Manaf, and then Abd Manaf has a son called Hashim. I want to emphasize Hashim for a second, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he's called the Hashimi Prophet, and Nabil Hashimi. This is one of his names. His clan is the clan of Hashim. Okay, so look, Hashim has brothers, Nawfal, Muttalib, Abdul Shams. Hashim's got uncles, Abdul Dar, Abdul Uzza. He has great uncles like Zuhra. The Prophet ﷺ's, his family, like his little clan, is the Hashim clan. It's really important to remember that, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to get lots of people from these other families who are going to have prejudice against the Prophet, peace be upon him. And the reason why is because he comes from that clan and he's not from our clan. You get it? So our clan has bad blood with Hashim. You see what I mean? So that influences the way that they then, how they perceive the Prophet when the Prophet ﷺ eventually comes. So really important to emphasize Hashim, and we'll talk about him a lot, but he's very, very important, the Hashimi Prophet. So just to remember that Hashim is the actual clan of the Prophet ﷺ. So let's talk about Qusay then and the rise of Quraysh. Okay, so what happens is that Khuza'ah is in charge, Qusay comes along. Qusay is clearly the foremost person of his generation. He's just a remarkable individual. So what Qusay does is that Qusay marries the daughter of the chief of Khuza'ah. So Khuza'ah is the ruling family. Qusay marries her daughter. So he's now the son-in-law of the ruling family of Makkah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So he's married the daughter of the chief, right? He's now the son-in-law. And what happens as the years go by, the chief of Khuza'ah is looking at all his sons, and then he's looking at Qusay, and he's like, well, I mean, this guy's clearly the guy to take charge after I'm gone, right? So what happens is after the chief of Khuza'ah dies, the power passes to Qusay, right? That's what happens. So Qusay basically gets all the power back by marrying someone, right? He marries into the family and then he gets the power back that way. Now, The other brothers, like the actual sons, are obviously not happy about this. There are battles, there are kind of things that happen, but Qusay manages to overcome all that. So Qusay is now in charge, and what Qusay now does is that he now invites all of his cousins to come into the heart of the city of Makkah, build houses, just populate it, right? Because Qusay's cousins are all scattered, because up until this point, Makkah's been ruled by Khuza'ah. So Khuza'ah were the people whose houses were all around the Kaaba and like sort of like, you know, they were in the city center, as it were, right? But now that Qusay's taken charge, Qusay now invites all of his cousins, all of his family to come build yourselves house. Qusay builds himself a mansion right beside the Kaaba. He builds himself a huge mansion, right? And all the cousins. So now Quraysh are back, right? For the first time since the time of Ismail, alayhi salam, for the first time, now the Quraysh, the descendants of Ismail, are back and they're in charge. And Qusay rules over them as king. He is absolute king, absolute authority. Nobody challenges him, okay? And he lives a life of just like a king, okay? So it's because of him that Quraysh, the descendants of Ismail, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, it's because of Qusay now that they're back, okay? But when you have a rich father who's all powerful, what always happens in the next generation? Yeah, inheritance, right? People start fighting over inheritance, okay? So Qusay has managed to do what he's done. So what happens now is that after Qusay dies, his children now start to fight over power, okay? So who are Qusay's children? His eldest son is called Abd-Dar, okay? Sorry, his eldest son is called, Abd-Dar, right? He has a second son called Abd Manaf, and then he's got more sons, but these are the ones that are kind of well known, right? Now, Qusay, before he dies, he gives his power, transfers his power to Abd-Dar, right? So Qusay basically, and the reason they say is because Abd-Dar was the weakest of all of them. He was the weakest of all of them. But he was Qusay's favorite, right? So he's the weakest of them, but he's my firstborn. Do you know what I mean? And he wants his son to be as respected as all the other sons are, right? So before Qusay dies, he says to Abd-Dar, here's the keys to the Kaaba, here's the flag, because in ancient times, you didn't go to war without the flag of your tribe, right? So he gives him the flag, he gives him the keys to the Kaaba, and he says, it's you now, okay? Qusay now dies, and now Abd-Dar is chief of Quraysh and chief of Makkah, but he's not the special son. The special son is Abd Manaf, right? And everybody can see that very clearly, okay? And they're saying, look, we understand what Qusay wanted, but for the good of the city, for the survival of our tribe, it should be the most qualified person who takes charge, right? So the rest of the clans of Quraysh, or the rest of all the families, they all gather round Abd Manaf's son Hashim, right? And they basically say that we want Hashim to be the chief, right? Abd-Dar obviously doesn't want to give up his power, right? So now you have a situation where a lot of the tribes are all siding with Abd Manaf's family, now Hashim, right, his son, and you've got one or two tribes who are siding with Abd-Dar. Now, the most notable one I'll bring to your attention is this one here, Makhzum. Makhzum is one of the few tribes, they side with Abd-Dar against Hashim. Who comes out of Makhzum is Abu Jahl. So Abu Jahl's family had a natural hatred and prejudice towards the clan of Hashim. Do you understand how it's working now? Like the family dynamics have a big part to play in what actually happens in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The family dynamics are really, really, and if you don't remember all the details, not very important. But what I'm trying to just get through is this idea that all of this stuff, the family politics, has a massive part to play in what happens later. Who follows the Prophet ﷺ straight away? Who accepts his message straight away? Who's hesitant? And who is downright against him? And who are the worst enemies? Some of the worst enemies of the Prophet come from Makhzum, right? But it's because the families already have very, very bad blood. And we'll see that when we come to that part of the story. Abu Jahl's insults towards the Prophet ﷺ and all of that is all attacking the fact that he's one of the Hashimis. They're at it again. You see what I mean? It's all family kind of stuff, right? So, right. Does any of that make sense? Does anyone want me to clarify anything? Because there's a lot of information there. Does anyone need anything clarified? So the important thing, Qusay is king, basically. Qusay dies. He gives his power to Abd-Dar, but Abd-Dar is not special. Abd Manaf is special. So what happens is all the other tribes, apart from a few, they want the power to transfer to Abd Manaf's family, and that would be Hashim. Okay? All right? So Abd Manaf is just the most capable person of all the sons. They just know that he's the guy to lead the tribe, you know, and for the good of the tribe, they want him.
Does he ever get to leave, or does he just go to?
No, Abd Manaf refuses to do it because Abd Manaf is like, I'm going to respect my father's wishes, so he won't do it. That's why people rally around Hashim, the son, because Hashim is like he's the special person of his generation. So Qusay marries the daughter of the chief of Khuzā. We just said that. Quraysh splinters between Abd Manaf and Abd-Dar. Okay, so this is the family fallout that happens. Okay, and so what happens is that they come to a compromise, right? Because what's about to happen is all-out war. Okay, the tribes of the clan of Hashim and all these tribes are about to go to war with Abd-Dar, and so at the last minute, they come up with a compromise to prevent war. So the compromise is that we'll divide the responsibilities of the tribe. Okay, the most important thing is that Hashim and his clan are now responsible for feeding and watering the Hajis, because people are coming for Hajj, right? Even though we're living in pre-Islam, people are still coming to visit the temple of Abraham, right? People are still coming to visit the Kaaba. So Hashim's responsible for hospitality, right? Abd-Dar's tribe, they keep the keys to the Kaaba and they keep the standard of war. So in other words, if you want access to the Kaaba, you have to go through Abd-Dar. And if the tribe decides to go to war, it has to be that Abd-Dar okays it. So this is how the responsibilities are divided. And this is enough to prevent the war because each clan now has a special honor. Is that okay? Does anyone want me to clarify anything? Okay, so let's talk about Hashim. Hashim's a really, really special, very, very important person. Hashim is now the great-grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so the great-grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. So by the time he becomes chief, this is his task, right? Is hospitality of all people who are coming to visit the Kaaba, people who are coming for Hajj. This is a major source of income for Makkah, right? All these visitors coming to visit the Kaaba. So the fact that Hashim's the one this is a high honor for him and his family, that they're the ones that welcome the guests and so on and so forth, feed them and do all that. Okay. Now Hashim also does something else which is really, really important. Okay. Yes, we're getting visitors coming to Makkah. Yes, all of that. But you still have periods where, okay, when the Hajj season comes and the visitors come, people are buying and selling, we get an influx of money. But then, you know, when that's not happening, we're starting to, like, times get tight, food is not, you know, money starts to get a bit scarce. So Makkah goes through periods of, you know, doing all right and then really struggling financially, like the city, just people, just because there's no trade happening and it's the sort of, you know, it's not the Hajj months. So Makkah needs another source of income. We need another. The Hajj isn't enough, basically, to pay for us throughout the year. We need another source of income. Now, one year there's a drought, and the drought gets so bad. The drought gets so bad that families start to go outside the city of Makkah, and the father of a family will start digging a bunch of graves because they're just expecting that they're all just gonna. I mean, the drought gets that bad because there's nobody going to be left to dig our graves. So the families start digging graves for their families. The fathers start, right. That's how bad the poverty gets at one point, right? In terms of like when it gets really bad and the drought hits and all of that, it's really, really bad. And then Hashim has a brainwave. Okay, he has a brainwave, which is, why don't we try to do trade in other places? So we're just relying on everyone coming to us to visit the Kaaba. Why don't we go to them and do business there? Okay, we'll go to them and we'll do business there. And so what Hashim does is that he gathers together whatever resources they have, anything that they can sell, and he organizes a business trip way up north to Syria, Palestine and Syria. Okay, and that happens in the winter. No, sorry, in the summer. And then in the winter, he organizes a business trip down the way now towards Yemen. And he does this business trip to Yemen. And that brings in a lot of wealth because these people are now traveling up and down, right? And what they're doing is that they're buying and selling stuff from Syria, coming back to Makkah, going back down to Yemen, and then buying and selling stuff. And now what he's done is he's established a trade link between Syria there and Yemen down here. Quraysh have basically now become middlemen between two huge empires, right? Up there in Syria, you've got the Roman Byzantine Empire, and then down here in Yemen, we'll find out, was a very great kingdom as well. Quraysh have now become this wonderful sort of middle link between the two, right? And so this brainwave that Hashim had, this genius idea, brings huge amounts of wealth into Makkah. Huge amounts of wealth into Makkah. Okay? And so Hashim really, the way that Qusay made this massive difference to the story of Makkah, Hashim also plays a huge part in making Makkah as great and wealthy as it is by the time the Prophet ﷺ is born. Okay, so he brings a lot of wealth and a lot of prestige also to his clan. Don't forget the family politics. Other people don't like the clan of Hashim, right, because of the family politics. But now his family, the Hashim family, are now suddenly like, they've got loads of prestige now because we're the ones who brought all the wealth into the city, right? So again, there's a lot of dynamics going on here, right? Family dynamics. Now, if you're to travel from Mecca up to Syria, Palestine, you're going to pass through Medina because Medina's on the way, right? At that time, it wasn't called Medina. At that time, it was called Yathrib. Okay? So, Yathrib. It's not called Medina until the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So, Yathrib is on the way to Syria. And naturally, if you're traveling big, huge caravan of, stuff, and you're traveling up to Yathrib, you're going to stop in Yathrib on your way. That's going to be one of the stops. In Yathrib, he meets a very beautiful woman called Salma, and she happens to be the chief of the daughter of one of the chiefs, and he proposes to her, and she accepts the proposal on two conditions. Number one, she gets to stay in Yathrib. She doesn't have to move to Makkah with her husband. And number two, if they have any children, the children stay with her. This is Salma's conditions for marriage. And Hashim was clearly smitten enough that he was like, yeah, cool, right, no worries. Okay, so he marries Salma in Yathrib. Okay, and Salma has a son called Shayba. Very, very important man. The rest of this evening is going to be dedicated to Shayba, right? Very, very, very important man. His full name is Shaybatul Hamd. Okay, Hamd obviously means the one who praises. Is there another name that means the one who praises? Hamd, Muhammad, right? So he carries a name which is kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen. But it's called Shaybatul Hamd. Shayba means grey hairs. Okay, and they say that he was born with grey hair, or he was born with like silver hair. That was kind of his something like. But in any case, this is Salma's son that she bears Hashim, and he lives with Salma in Yathrib. So this is a son of Hashim who's not living in Makkah. He's living in Yathrib, right? Does it all make sense? Does anyone need me to clarify anything here? Okay, right, fine. Yes. Sorry, did you? All right, okay, sorry. So Hashim then continues on to Palestine and he dies there. Okay, and guess where he dies? Guess where he's buried? Gaza. If you go to Gaza today, may Allah give us the opportunity to do that and protect that land. There is a mosque there, and his grave is in that mosque. The people of Gaza know that very well. Like the mosque is a landmark in that place, but he's buried there, and his grave is still there in Gaza.
Is the mosque still standing?
As of today, I don't know. I really don't know, but you can go. I mean, there's loads of pictures of it online, and I mean, I hope so. Inshallah, so this is what happens, right? So now Hashim's died, okay? And let me just show you this because I think I love a map now, right? So there's Mecca, there's the great Roman Byzantine Empire, there's the great kingdom of the south of Yemen. We'll talk about them as well. And so by going up there and doing business, and then going down there and doing business in the summer and the winter, you've now created this lifeline. So that makes Mecca wealthy. It also makes Yathrib wealthy because all these people are stopping in these areas, right? So Hashim brings a lot of wealth. I mean, he really changes that region. That one little brainwave that he had really changes that region. And in the books of Sirah, some people even talk about the fact that God inspired that in Hashim, right? I mean, that's for one idea to make a difference to that whole area of the world. I mean, that's like a type of, divine intervention there, right? Okay. Now, the Quran talks about this, okay? So if you were to, I don't know, people have like a Quran app on your phone, or like if you just, if you Google surahs or whatever, but if you want to, you can do this right now, right? If you open up your Quran app, or if you Google Surah 106, right? And somebody tell me what that surah is called. What's that surah called? Surah Quraysh, right? And what does it say? Can you read it, Faiza? Can you read it? The translation. Yeah. For the security of Quraysh.
Their accustomed security in the caravan of the winter and summer.
Their security in the caravans of the winter and the summer. Yeah. Because in summer they're going, that's the caravan that way, and in winter it's going that way. So God in the Quran is telling the Quraysh, this was for your security. I did this for you. The caravans of the summer and the winter. And then what does it say?
Let them worship the Lord of this house.
Let them worship the Lord of the house. Look what I did for you, Quraysh. So you better worship me. You better worship the Lord of the house. Right? And then it ends with, I saved you from hunger and I saved you from fear. You were digging your own graves and I saved you from that. So how dare you worship anything other than the Lord of the house? The house being the Kaaba, right? How dare you worship? Look at what I saved you from. Because of Rihlat ash-shita'i was-sayf, because of the journeys of the summers and the winters. The Quran speaks about the ancestors, speaks about Hashim. It speaks about these moments in the ancestry of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah. It's really amazing. Okay. Right. What's next? So let's talk about Shayba, right? So Shayba is this son of Hashim, right, who is living in Yathrib, which is now called Medina. He's living in Yathrib, and he's just living his life in Yathrib. Like, he's just happy with his mum living in Yathrib. Hashim's now died in Palestine. So the family of Hashim, the clan of Hashim, what are they going to do now? They're going to look around at all the sons of Hashim and go, right, who's going to lead? And they're looking around at the sons of Hashim and they're going, oh my God, this is not looking good, right? We don't have a capable son who can live up to the legacy of Hashim and Abd Manaf and Qusay, the great Qusay, you know, our answer. Who's going to do it? And they're looking around, oh, kids, this is awkward, right? So then somebody's like, wait a minute, didn't Hashim have another son somewhere? I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. He married somebody in Yathrib and all that. Right, we should send somebody to go check him out. Maybe he's going to be half decent. So they send Hashim's brother, whose name is Muttalib. So Hashim's brother, Muttalib, who is Shayba's uncle, does that make sense? Hashim's brother would be Shayba's uncle, Muttalib, right? His daya, if you're into that sort of terminology, his daya. So they send him to go to Yathrib and check out the boy. Muttalib goes to Yathrib and he just is convinced this is the guy. He's 12 years old. Shayba's 12 years old, right? He's like, this is the guy. He's only 12. I can just see greatness in this boy. For us as Muslims, what he saw was the light of the Prophet ﷺ. That's what it is for us as Muslims. That's what Muttalib saw, right? He doesn't know that. Muttalib doesn't know that, but that's our explanation of it. He saw the light of the Prophet ﷺ in Shayba's face, okay? And so he's convinced. And so he says to Salma, let me take him back to Mecca, okay? And he convinces her, right? So he's like, look, he's clearly destined for greatness. Would you not rather that he becomes the Lord of the Kaaba rather than just wasting his life in this little bin, right? Sorry, this is like, do you know what I mean? Like, would you not rather that he fulfills his full potential? So Salma eventually is convinced, right? So Muttalib takes the boy Shayba, puts him on the back of his camel, and he rides into Mecca, right? And people who are watching Muttalib come in with a boy on his camel, they're like, oh, look, Muttalib got a new servant, right? Muttalib's got a new servant. He bought a slave, right? And so people are like, oh, yeah, so what's up with the slave? You know, all that kind of. And Muttalib's like, this isn't a slave, it's my nephew, right? And so it's like people start laughing, oh, right, okay. And so from that day forward, Shayba's name becomes the servant of Muttalib, which is Abd al-Muttalib. That's his new name, okay? So he gets given this sort of nickname, Abdul Muttalib, right? Because of the joke. The joke is that everyone thought he was Muttalib's slave, and it turns out he's his nephew. There's a misunderstanding, ha ha ha, right? That's what was comedy back in those days, right? So like, you know, ha ha, big joke, right? Okay, it was really all good, right? So that becomes his nickname now, Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib, as you may know, is the Prophet ﷺ's grandfather. And Abdul Muttalib, like I said, the rest of the time that we have is going to be dedicated. He is an amazing man, Abdul Muttalib. You're going to see just the things that he does, the leadership that he shows is just really incredible. Now, the first major thing that Abdul Muttalib accomplishes as chief, okay, of Hashim, the first major accomplishment, and again, for us, this is divine, right? Because this is God's way of showing that Hashim is the clan that God has chosen. Because I don't know if you remember, it was a month ago, right? But what happened to the well of Zamzam? When Jurhum were being kicked out of Mecca, what did they do? They buried it. They buried the well of Zamzam out of spite. If we can't have it, no one can. So Abdul Muttalib is now chief, right? He's in Mecca. And what happens is, you can see, this is what Mecca probably looked like in his time, right? Now, as you know, the Kaaba, see if you do like a bird's eye view, imagine there's a bird's eye view of the Kaaba, right? You've got the Kaaba there, and then on one side of the Kaaba, you've got like a low wall, yeah? So do we know what that's called? It's called the Hijr of Ismail. The reason why it's called the Hijr of Ismail is because Ismail's grave is here. He's buried here. Okay? So the Hijr of Ismail. So Abdul Muttalib had this habit, right? He loved to kind of that was his area that he liked to chill out in. So a lot of times they used to bring like a couch, like a bed for him, and they would put it in the Hijr, and he would just relax there all day long, you know, and people would come visit him. He would do his kind of chief stuff from there. And he goes to sleep right? He takes a nap there, and he has a dream. And so in the dream, a figure comes to him and says, dig clarity. And in his dream, he asks, what's clarity? And then he wakes up and he's like, oh, whatever, right? The next day, he falls asleep again. That same person comes back to him and says, dig goodness. He says, what's goodness? And then he wakes up. Okay, that's quite a coincidence, right? The third day, same dream, and the figure says to him, dig the treasured hoard. Dig the treasured hoard. What is the treasured hoard? And he wakes up. Okay, now this is something now. I don't know what it is, but it's something. And the fourth day, he goes to sleep, and the figure says, dig Zamzam. Now, centuries have passed, generations have passed. If people have even heard of Zamzam, it's like just a story or a word, or like, not even clear what it is. Okay. And the person in the dream then says, dig her, you will not regret it. She is your inheritance and the inheritance of your ancestor. She will never dry. She will never fail to water the Hajjis. This is the dream. This is what he's told in the dream. And then he's told in the dream, look for a place where there's blood and dung. So now Abdul Muttalib wakes up and he's absolutely convinced that this is some sort of message for him. And so he wakes up and then he starts doing his tawaf. And as he's doing his tawaf, okay, he notices, as he's walking around doing his tawaf, he notices two of the idols, right? There's two idols in front of the Kaaba door, somewhere in this area, front of the Kaaba door. There's two idols, and that's where people used to go and do sacrifice. So there's always blood in that area, like dried blood. And then there's always dung as well. You know, they bring all the animals to sacrifice them, and, you know, animals just poo wherever they are, and then they so there's blood and there's dung. Okay, so what does he do? He runs back into the house. He grabs a pickaxe, comes back out, and he starts. And this is early morning, so people start coming out of their houses and what are you doing? Right? And he's just ignoring everybody. Dig, 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 dig. Seriously, like, what are you doing, bro? Right? Like, this is holy ground. There's two idols there, right? This is holy ground to these people. What are you doing? And he's just ignoring, dig, dig, dig. Now people start gathering around. It's like, dude, you need to stop that. So Abdul Muttalib goes into the house, and he's only got one son, Harith. He calls Harith out, come and stand watch guard for me, right? Make sure nobody does anything. He dig, 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 dig. It goes on and on and on. And then finally he strikes, he makes a noise, right? And there's something there. So he calls out, Allahu Akbar, right? Or something like that. It says he thanks to God, basically, like he calls out. Now everybody's like, okay, what's he found, right? And then he finds this kind of lid. He opens up the lid, and treasure comes out. And they describe it like golden statues of deer and like precious, like swords made of precious metals and all this kind of thing, right? He starts pulling this stuff out the ground. And all those people who are around, what are they going to say now? What are they going to say? This is our inheritance. Yeah, I mean, it's our inheritance as well, right? I mean, we're all the same family here, right? I mean, we're all, you know, we're brothers and cousins and, you know, like all that kind of thing, right? Okay. Now, this is, if you're Abdul Muttalib, you're scared, because what's to stop them from just all attacking me and just taking my stuff, right? So who's he got to protect him? One son, Harith, right? Now, luckily, not luckily, I mean, we believe that it's this is the way it was meant to happen, but what happens is that good sense prevails, and someone says, okay, let's draw lots to decide who's whose. So they basically have the Kaaba, Abdul Muttalib, and then the other families. Everybody gets a lot, and then you just like, it's like rolling dice, right? Whichever one it lands on, that gets given to them. So they throw the things, and everything lands on the Kaaba, like it just belongs to the Kaaba. So they take all the treasure and they just put it inside the Kaaba, except for a few items of treasure like swords and things. They fall to Abdul Muttalib. So basically, the rest of the family end up getting nothing, because they believe in this, right? They believe that if you cast arrows or whatever it is, that's the gods are telling you what they want. So the rest of the family gets nothing. Abdul Muttalib gets some swords and things, and the Kaaba gets the rest of the treasure, so they keep it in there. Okay, Abdul Muttalib, he melts the swords down, and he uses the melted metal to make the door of the Kaaba. So if you've ever been to the Kaaba now and you see it's got metal doors, that tradition started with Abdul Muttalib. Those are not the exact ones, but that tradition started with Abdul Muttalib, the kind of golden doors, metal doors. Okay, so he recovers Zamzam. So he basically reclaims the birthright of his ancestor, Prophet Ismail. Yeah. So again, for us as Muslims, this is divine intervention, right? This is divine intervention. Yeah. He was meant to find it. Now, this incident causes him to really think, because it all, alhamdulillah, ended up okay. But if they did attack me, I've got nobody to protect me. I've got one son. So Abdul Muttalib prays to God and he says, if you give me 10 sons, I'll sacrifice one for you. Now, fully not believing that that's ever going to happen, right? But it's a thing that God, please give me more sons that can work with me and protect me and all of that. So this is the prayer he makes. If you give me 10 sons, oh God, I'll sacrifice one for you. And guess what happens? He has 10 sons. Years go by, years go by. He already had Harith. Now he has 9 other sons. And every time a son is born, he's like, oh, this is great, great, great. And then the 9th son is born, and then he does the math. 1, 2, 3, 10. Oh no. Right? Now, if it was, I'm not going to say you or me because I'm not speak for you. If that was me, my first thing is, how do I get out of this? Let me go to find a sheikh who will give me an opinion that says I don't need to do it. That's the first thing you're going to do, right? Abdul Muttalib is so devoted to God that he's like, I swore an oath I'm going to do it. So what he does is he takes the 10 sons, he gathers them all, right? And he takes them all into the Kaaba in front of the chief idol. Each son has an arrow with his name on it. He does the thing, he rolls the dice or whatever it is, he draws the lots, and the son whose name comes out is his favorite son, Abdullah, right? His favorite son, Abdullah. Okay, Abdullah, by the way, is the father of the Prophet, right? So maybe I shouldn't have said that's a spoiler, right? But he does that, and it comes out with Abdullah. Abdullah is the youngest son of all the sons. He's clearly the most capable, prominent, like he's everybody's favorite. And also in the books of Seerah, they say that Abdullah was the most beautiful young man that anyone had ever, like generations, old people in Quraysh used to just talk about, we've never seen anyone as beautiful as that boy. Clearly Abdul Muttalib's favorite son, right, as well. But it comes out with Abdullah. Now, they actually describe it. They say Abdul Muttalib took the knife, he took Abdullah's hand, and he just straight led him out, as if he didn't want to give himself time to think about it. It's too painful to think of. He doesn't want to give himself time to think. So he just starts heading out, and he walks over to the place where Zamzam is, because that's where they used to sacrifice the animals. Now, all the people are like, people who are hanging around, and they're like, what are you doing? Right? And he's, again, just ignoring. I mean, like, look at Abdul Muttalib. This is the second time that he's just blacking everybody out. I have a job to do, my devotion to God. So he puts Abdullah down. He's got the knife in his hand. Okay. And then some of the narrations, they say that one of the uncles basically just pulls Abdullah, like, what's wrong with you? And Abdul Muttalib explains what happened. He says, right, okay, we're clearly not going to do that. So let's figure something else out, right? So one of the uncles steps in and he does that thing. Let's find a sheikh who will give us an opinion that says it's okay, right? You'll always find one, right? There'll always be one, right? So some things never change, right? Right? We'll find somebody will give us. So they say, look, there's a witch who lives in Yathrib, where he comes from. There's a witch who lives there. She's in touch with spirits. She's in touch with jinn and things like that. She'll be able to get us an answer from the unseen and whatever. So they go. And her advice is basically what to do is, she says, what's the, like, if one of your people is killed, what's the sort of blood money in your culture? And they say, well, if somebody dies, it's 10 camels. Like, if I kill you accidentally, what I have to pay is 10 camels. So the witch says, go back to your country, Makkah, right? And put him on one side and put 10 camels on the other side and roll the dice, draw the lots. And if it lands on the camels, then just sacrifice the camels and you're done. If it lands on Abdullah, then add 10 more camels until it lands on the camels, and that's God's accepted it. So they go back and they do it. So 10 camels lands on Abdullah. 20 camels lands on Abdullah. 30 camels lands on Abdullah. 40 camels lands on Abdullah, right? So you're thinking, okay, clearly it's meant to be Abdullah. Now, the other uncles in that are like, no, keep going. Don't you dare stop. Because it doesn't matter. Whatever it gets to, we'll all chip in and we'll all pay for it. It gets to 100 camels, and then finally it lands on the camels. Okay? Now, this is the bit I find most amazing, right? They're all like, okay, let's do 100 camels. Abdullah says, no, I want to do it again. Abdul Muttalib, he says, I want to do this again. He's still got scruples. After all, like, he's been given his easy fatwa. You've got your way out. But Abdul Muttalib is so pious and devoted to God. No, do it again. Make sure. It's incredible. These people are amazing people, right? So they do it again, and sure enough, same time, 100 camels on Abdullah. And then he says, no, one more time, just to be sure. Like, I want to make sure that God has truly accepted this. And it does. And so they sacrifice the 100 camels, and they distribute the meat to everybody. And it says they even feed the wild animals with the meat of the camels. And it's just like a huge kind of celebration. And this is why many, many, many years later, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will say, I am the child of two sacrifices. One was Abdullah, and the other one was Ibrahim and Ismail, right? The same episode repeats itself. Okay? So Abdullah then grows up, okay, and he gets of the age to marry. So Abdul Muttalib gets him married to a lady called Amina, okay, and these are the parents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah is the father, Amina is the mother. Now, yeah, okay, right. So now we're going to talk about the year of the elephant. It depends, actually, because that's like the hour. So if you want to finish this off, or we can just leave it to next time. It's up to you. I won't get offended. Like, whatever you want to do. If you want to leave it there, if you want to keep going. Probably, I would say another 10 minutes. Either another 10 minutes, or we can just stop. It's really up to you. Yeah? Okay, right. So, the year that Abdullah and Amina get married, the parents of the Prophet ﷺ get married, this is a year which is known as the year of the elephant. Okay, now I'm going to introduce you to the kingdom down here, because we said the Roman Byzantine Empire. The kingdom down here in Yemen is called the Kingdom of Aksum, right? These people are East Africans. This is an East African kingdom. And what they did was they crossed the sea and they invade Yemen. They cross the sea and they invade Yemen. So the Kingdom of Aksum is this and this bit here, okay? And the king of the Kingdom of Aksum is the Negus, and his governor in Yemen is a man called Abraha, okay? So this is the Kingdom of Aksum, right? So that part of Yemen, the Arabian part of the Kingdom of Aksum, is ruled by Abraha, okay? Now, Abraha, to impress the king, he builds a massive cathedral. They were Christians, by the way. Sorry, I should have said. He builds a massive cathedral in Yemen, in a city called Sana'a, as a tribute to the king, right? There are a few reasons why he needs to suck up to the king. He's actually in the king's bad books. So he builds this huge cathedral in honor of the king, right? This is where the cathedral was. It's not there anymore, but this is a location where the cathedral was, okay? He builds a massive cathedral. And they say that he went to the palace of the Queen of Sheba, which was in Yemen, and he like looted all the gold and the marble from there, right? And he used that as part of this massive, I mean, it was the most decadent, beautiful thing you've ever seen. And he writes to the king and he says, I have created a house of worship in Arabia that all the Arabs will travel to see this place. right? Now, that doesn't go down well with the people of Mecca, because the people of Mecca say, hang on a second, we have a house of worship that all the Arabs travel to see, Kaaba, right? Okay, so what happens is a man of a tribe called Kinana, he decides to show Abraha what he thinks of this cathedral. So he travels all the way down to Yemen. He goes into the cathedral. Okay, there's young people here, right? But he goes into the cathedral. He pops his trousers down. He cops a squat, and he relieves himself, right, on the marble floor of the cathedral, right? All right. He goes to the bathroom in the middle of the cathedral, and he lifts up his trousers, and he's like, "That's what I think of your cathedral," right? And he goes on his merry way home, right? Now, when Abraha hears about this, he is in absolute rage. Okay, so first question: who was that man? Where is he from? And he's told he is a man of Mecca, and that's the house of worship that the Arabs go to, right? So he swears revenge on the people of Mecca, not the people of Mecca. He swears revenge on the house of worship, which is in Mecca, the temple of Mecca, right? I'm going to show these people who's in charge. I'm going to go there and destroy it. And then they'll have no choice but to come to my cathedral. Okay? So he gathers together his army, and he also, in the army, has an elephant. Now, the Arabs have never seen elephants before. Elephants are native to like Africa and India. They're not native to... So this is why it's called the Year of the Elephant, because this is, for many Arabs, they're like, what is this creature? Never heard of, like, never seen anything like this before. So to scare them, he brings an elephant into the army, okay? And so he starts heading up the way towards Mecca. And on the way, other tribes are trying to intercept, because they've all heard now what's going on. So they try to intercept the army of Abraha, okay? And the army of Abraha easily wipes them all away, because these people, they come from a very powerful kingdom, and these are just Arab tribes, you know what I mean? Like, they easily just scatter them aside, okay? And so they're just constantly, like, just totally wiping away every opposition that comes to them, okay? Now, one of the tribes that tries to intercept them, they basically kill everyone, but they keep the chief. The chief's name is Nophail. They keep him, right, because we need a guide to guide us through to where Mecca is. So Nophail is like, well, what are you going to do, right? I have to do this, otherwise they're going to kill me. So he basically becomes their guide on the way up to Mecca. Now, the reason why I mention Nophail is because Nophail, he's now traveling with this elephant all the way up to Mecca. And so he's watching the guy who's in charge, like who the elephant keeper, he's watching him, and he's watching how does he command the elephant. Like, he's studying this animal, he's never seen it before, right? How does he control the animal? He's watching him carefully, and this is gonna be important later. Okay. Now finally they get to Ta'if. Ta'if is not far from Mecca. I mean, if you're traveling up that way, they get to Ta'if, right? People of Ta'if come out and they're like, it's not us, by the way, right? Because they have a temple as well, a temple to their god Allat, right? So there's like, it's not us, go that way, Mecca's that way, right? I only mention that because people of Ta'if and the people of Mecca always have a big rivalry, because Mecca has the Kaaba, Ta'if has their own temple, right? And they want to be the center of attention. They're jealous of the people of Mecca because they have the Kaaba, right? That's going to be important later, because when the Prophet goes to Ta'if years later, right? So it all plays in. So they divert, they go to Mecca, okay? So they get to this place in Mecca, right? This is called Wadi Muhassir, okay? This is where they get to. This is just outside of Mecca. So I don't know if anybody's been on Hajj, but Mina's here, Muzdalifa's here, Mina and Muzdalifa. So it's right in the middle between Mina and Muzdalifa. So if you ever get the chance to go to Hajj, pray inshallah that all of you get that opportunity, and those of us who've been to go again. But if you ever go, if you're in Mina or if you're in Muzdalifa, and you're facing towards Mecca, it's right there in front of you, the place where they get to. So they get to this place, and Abdul Muttalib comes out as now chief of Hashim and basically the leader of Quraysh, basically, right? He comes out to negotiate with Abraha. Okay? Now, Abraha, as the army is just like heading towards Mecca, they're obviously just killing people, just taking anything they can, right? And one of the things that Abraha does is he finds 200 camels and he just takes them, right? So Abdul Muttalib comes out to negotiate, and in the books they say that Abraha had this tent wherever he went, and he had like a throne for himself. And it says when Abdul Muttalib came into the tent to negotiate, he says Abraha was so amazed by Abdul Muttalib, just his face, that he gets up off his throne and he comes down and he sits down on the ground with Abdul Muttalib. Like Abdul Muttalib just had so much nobility about him. He had such a way about him. He was just such an awesome, as in a person who inspired awe, such an awesome individual that Abraha it was just a reflex. It just kind of came down to his level, right? So he sits down with him, and Abraha says to Abdul Muttalib, I have no quarrel with you or your people, right? You can just leave. I'm here for the temple of Abraham. I'm here for that, okay? And Abdul Muttalib, again, this is a great leader, right? And also a man of God. Abdul Muttalib's like, fine, whatever, right? Do what you have to do. But he says, listen, you took my camels. I've got 200 camels and you took them, right? And Abraha goes, listen, until now, I had a lot of respect for you, but you seriously, this is what you came to talk to me about, 200 camels, right? And this is Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib says, I am the Lord of the camels. They're my responsibility, so I'm looking after them. The temple has its Lord, and he will look after it. Abraha says, he's not going to be able to protect it from me. And Abdul Muttalib stands up and he says, we'll see about that. So Abdul Muttalib goes back into Mecca, people gathering around. What do we do? Abdul Muttalib says, just everybody evacuate. Just go. We're not going to be able to fight them anyway. You may as well just evacuate. Abdul Muttalib then goes to the Kaaba. I mean, if you imagine this moment, he's going to the Kaaba. He's passing by the well of Zamzam, which he rediscovered by divine intervention. He rediscovered this well. Like, this is his. And he goes and he holds the lock of the door of the Kaaba. And he says, oh God, your servants, your created humans, if their homes are attacked, they protect their homes. This is your house. Protect it. And then he lets go of the lock. He takes his family and they go up the hills. And so the people of Mecca basically go up the hills and they just watch from below. Okay. Now, Nufail, that guide, right? This whole time he's been watching. So while Abraha is distracted, Nufail takes the ear of the elephant and he whispers into the ear of the elephant a command to sit. So the elephant just plumps itself down and sits. Okay. And so Abraha's like, right, attack. Right. So the army is like, all that. Right, get the elephant up. Elephant won't get up. Right. Okay, give it a poke. So they get the sticks and they start poking at it. Elephant won't get up. Right. So then it's like, get the elephant up. So they start getting harsher and harsher and harsher to the point where they start getting hooks and sticking hooks into the flesh of the elephant, trying to pull the thing up, and it won't get up. So Nufail says, try facing it the other way. So they face it the opposite way, elephant stands up. And then they go, right, okay, now turn them around. They turn the elephant around to face the Kaaba, plops itself back down again. Right? And our scholars say that was a hint, right? They should have taken the hint at that point. Okay? So what happens, as you know, and this is now mentioned in the Quran, at that point, a very dark cloud appears from the direction of the sea. A very dark cloud. And as it gets closer, they realize that it's not a cloud, it's actually a flock of birds. Okay? Now, the descriptions of these birds are wild, right? It goes from they were just normal looking birds all the way to they had the head of lions and the feet of dogs, and the descriptions are wild, right? But more than likely they were just kind of normal looking birds, right? But these birds are now coming, and the thing is that in each claw they have one stone, a stone in this claw, a stone in that claw, and a stone in their beaks, and they swoop down to this army and they just drop the stones on the army. And every stone that hits a person, once a person's hit by a stone, his flesh straight away begins to rot. the flesh just begins rotting straight away as soon as they're hit by a stone. Okay? And so most of them die instantly, but some people, like the flesh is rotting off and they kind of like sort of survive. So they lose an arm or a leg or whatever, but they sort of live to tell the tale. Okay? Abraha himself is struck, and it said in the books, it says that his flesh did start to rot, but very slowly. So he orders a retreat. He's still okay. He orders a retreat, and on the journey back to Yemen, he just starts to get more and more gangrenous and more rotten, until by the time he gets back to Yemen, again, sorry, there's young people here, but like, why lie? You all watch movies, right? By the time he gets back to Yemen, he's lost his arms and legs, everything. He's just comes back to Yemen just a stump, and he eventually just dies of his just in the most humiliating way, back in his own, under the shadow of his own cathedral that he built, right? But most people are wiped out. So there's this, everybody evacuates, there's a retreat. And as it says, Abraha dies on the way. Now, this happens the year that the Prophet ﷺ was born. So some people who survive actually stay on in Mecca. Other people are kind of gone. And Aisha, radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, she used to say, when I was a child, I used to see people who were there at the Army of the Elephant, right? And she says, one of the elephant guides, one of the elephant wranglers, she says, I used to see him in Mecca as a child. I used to see him, and he was like all kind of deformed, and he was a beggar. He used to like sit, but people used to point to him and say he came with the Army of the Elephant, right? And some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to say, as children, we used to go run out and see the elephant dung, like it was still there. You know, they used to be like, that's where the elephant. And you could, so the traces of this episode lasted for a very long time into the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, now obviously word of this gets spreads to all of Arabia, hears about this amazing incident, and from this time on, the Quraysh have a even more prestige, because God, look at the way that God protected them. So they become known as people of God, right? Ahlullah. Okay, and the year that this happens becomes known as the year of the elephant. Now, this incident happens in the month of Muharram, the first month of the year Muharram. 2 months later is Rabiul Awwal. And Rabiul Awwal, in the year of the elephant, is the year of the birth of our Prophet. So inshallah, next time, the plan is that we're going to talk about the kind of the supernatural signs that took place just prior to the birth of the Prophet, and the things that the signs that God sent to show that the birth of a prophet was imminent. And then we're going to talk about the birth of the Prophet, the early years of the Prophet as well, inshallah. Are there any questions or comments or anything like that at all? Yes, well, I mean that's the most of the books of Sirah, they just talk about one elephant. His name was Mahmud, by the way, the elephant's name, if you're interested. Apparently his name was Mahmud, the elephant's name, if you're interested. I don't know how. I mean, they all mention that, so I don't know where they got that information from, but it's, you know, there you go.
There's an elephant by the name Mahmoud. Isn't there?
That is that elephant.
That is an actual. No, it's also a type.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's also.
There's a species of elephant called the Mahmud elephant. Seriously?
Yeah, I only know the Danish name of it. It's just Mahmud.
Oh, interesting. Oh, yeah. That's really interesting. Very interesting. Oh, I never thought of that. That's really interesting.
I think mammoth. I think the English word is mammoth.
Mammoth? Mahmud? Who knows? Yeah, that's very interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or anything like that? So it's taken us 2 sessions to even get to the point we're going to talk about the birth of the Prophet, but you know, it's all good, sets the scene and kind of gives you an idea of what's going on by the time the Prophet was born, inshallah. So next one is going to be in Ramadan, right? So actually it's quite a blessed time to talk about the birth of the Prophet and all of that. We'll have, I think it's actually good, you know, it's worked out quite nicely that we get